Welcome to Who's a Good Human, a podcast about the animals that have left a mark on our hearts. From cats and dogs to chickens and horses, this is the podcast to lift your heart and remind you that animals make the world a better place. I'm Siangard, your host. This week, Leisl shares the story of two spunky brothers that have taught her more about love and caring than she expected.
First off, how did these beautiful orange fluff balls come into your life?
Well, I was living in Melbourne in a share house and I hadn't owned a cat in several years. And then one night I had a dream. I was playing with a ginger kitten and I woke up the next day and said, I need to get myself a cat. So I was chatting to my boss about my dream and she's like, oh my gosh, let's just hop on the adoption website. And I saw a picture of two ginger kittens. And one was sitting in front of the other, and then they reversed the position because they were selling both cats separately. But I immediately concocted this immaculate backstory for them, which was that they were brothers, they were living on the street, they were only 5 months old. Their mum had died saving them from a garbage truck and they were fending together. So in my mind, I could not separate them. And this is all within a split second of seeing that photograph. And I was just like, yeah, those are my boys. And I called up and said, yes, I want these animals. What can we do? And they said, wonderful, come in and, fill out the paperwork this afternoon. So you've got them. And I'm just like, yeah, great. So my boss gave me the afternoon off, which was very generous of her. And back when I was a casual worker, and I was just like, yeah, that's actual money out of my pocket. And went down and met them. And when I got there, they said, I'm so glad that you are here because a moment after you called, an elderly woman called up and said that she wanted the two boys. And I remember I would reflect on that quite a lot throughout their lives, wondering what their lives would have been had an old woman adopted them rather than a woman in her mid-20s.
Can you describe for me what they were like when you actually saw them for the first time and held them in your arm?
They were just the friendliest little boys. They were only 5 months old, so there was quite a lot of kitten in them, but they were adolescent size, so they were pretty lanky. They were pre-desexed, so I found it quite hilarious to see them with their little fluff-covered balls running around. Um, Spence was, he had a very beautiful set of features, a really nice sort of longish face, really big eyes, and he just looked very dignified. And I don't know why, but the name Spence popped into my head. And then Nipster, his brother, liked to bite things. He liked to nip things constantly. And so that's how he got his name Nipster. But they were extremely friendly, so happy to be picked up and not timid at all. And I just fell in love with them all over again. I'd already made the decision I was going to adopt them regardless of what they were like, but that absolutely cemented it in my mind.
So you took them home, and how long did it take for them to adjust to you and for you to enjoy having them in your space?
So I was living in a share house and I remember I had two roommates and I told them I was adopting a cat, and it never actually occurred to me to ask them. I just said, I'm doing this. One of my roommates already had a ginger cat and it was a very casual approach to it, I remember. I think about that now, living in a share house, bringing in two animals into a, not unstable environment, but definitely a fluid environment with people coming and going and another animal being there. And I'd probably rethink things quite a lot. But they adapted to it so quickly. And it was, this is going back almost 20 years. So, but, we didn't really have the sort of strict council laws that we tend to have now. So I would leave my back window open and the boys would go in and out at night time. They'd always sleep in the bed with me, but about 3 a.m. they'd get up and go outside, do their thing, terrorize the neighborhood and come back in for breakfast.
What were their personalities like?
Spence was definitely the more adventurous of the two. He was very brazen. He was comfortable with anyone. He'd just walk up to, back when we had gatherings and things like that, back in our youth. So he would just walk up and crawl into anyone's lap. He was a very, very comfortable cat. I remember a few weeks after we got him, I'd started letting them out and I could hear him meowing and I couldn't find him anywhere. And I was in the back courtyard of the house. Then I sort of look over my neighbor's fence and he's inside my neighbor's house and the door is shut and it's a glass door and he sees me and he's like, oh my God, oh my God. He's pouring at the door saying, let me out, let me out. I'm like, how the hell did you get into their house? And they weren't home, so I had to slip a note through the door, and poor guy was in there half the day. And then they came and knock on the door, and it was my neighbor saying, yeah, so I got your note. Your cat's in my house. He won't let me approach him. And I'm just like, no, that's fair enough. Went in and got him and said, I'm so sorry if he's taken a poo or a pee somewhere. It's only been a few weeks. So what had happened is that it was breakfast. They leave their back door open when they're having breakfast and then lock everything up and go to work. And during that time, Spence had just wandered into their kitchen and was just hanging out. So he was very much a very adventurous cat, but Nipster was the more understated of the two. He liked to hang back and just watch what Spence was doing. Spence would always come back with injuries from a fight or something like that, whereas Nipster was the one who would get a little bit sickly. So that was probably the difference between them. Nipster cost quite a lot in vet bills because of illness, and Spence cost quite a lot because of injuries. He was always ready to throw himself into everything. But after Spence, was with us for 15 years and then he passed away. And when he passed away, I was really quite concerned about Nipster. They'd been a bonded pair for 15 years. They were brothers. How was Nipster going to handle it? And it was like when the eldest sibling moves out and the middle child starts to get more attention, you saw this other side of Nipster start to emerge without Spence in his life. And it wasn't that he became more adventurous or anything like that, but he definitely became more vocal. He would walk into a room and announce himself. He was constantly mewling and creating noise in the house, whereas before he was always quite happy to be the quieter one. So yeah, that was pretty sweet to see.
Just curious, Leisl, I know that a lot of people don't think that cats have attachment to their owners or even sort of recognize the owners beyond being a paid slave because that's how sometimes people see cats. What was your experience of how you engaged with the cats and they engaged with you?
I think that is a bit of a fallacy. Like, I do think cats can be quite aloof, and sometimes, you do feel like you're a bit of a roommate to them rather than, an owner that takes care of them. But I felt very loved by Spence and Nips, especially when you meet other cats who aren't approachable, who aren't cuddly. Spence and Nips just love to smooch and love to cuddle. And now that they're no longer with me, those are the things that I remember when I would pick them up and hug them, how they'd snuggle into my shoulder or something like that. I felt very, very loved. Whenever I'd come back from a trip, and I'd sit down on the couch, they'd both crawl up and lie on my chest, that heartbeat to heartbeat feeling. And yeah, they were definitely very affectionate cats, but it's not just because of food or body warmth or anything like that. They knew who their owner was. They knew their home. They knew where they belonged, basically. So that's how I equate that love, that sort of freedom to express yourself in a really safe way. That's what I saw in them every single day. So I felt very loved, and they knew that they were loved as well.
I'm curious, when you came home for the day, and as you said, you came home from, say, a trip away and then back home, and maybe you hadn't seen Spence or Nipster for a little while, what were they like when you walked in the door? Can you talk me through that?
They'd come straight to the door. I was food in their mind as well. They say when you're trying to get animals to get closer to your children, you get the kids to feed them because it, just establishes a bond. To them, I was their food. I was their treat giver. Danny, my partner, he absolutely loved them and fed them and looked after them, but they didn't appreciate that in him. In me, they were just like, you are the primary caregiver. Yes, we absolutely love you. So they would come bounding towards the door. They were both very vocal cats. As male gingers, they say that they're quite a vocal breed. They'd come to the door and they'd just meow, 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 like very, very vocal, very loud. And we lived in quite a few different rentals and stuff, and they were so adaptable. Every single house we went to, they were really adaptable. And there was this one house we had with a very deep front porch, and that is where they liked to hang out every day. So I'd pull my car into the front yard, and they'd get up and stretch from where they'd been lying on the porch and walk over to the car to meet me. So yeah, it was pretty sweet.
Was there ever any situations they got themselves into besides just rocking up into the neighbour's house and saying, "Hi, I'm here," that stood out for you in terms of your memories of these two beautiful boys?
Oh, there's so many. How long is this podcast? The Adventures of Spence and Nipster should be a children's series. There was so much going on constantly. I used to call Nipster the $6 million cat because he had a couple of major surgeries in his life and everything, and we almost lost him once, which was about illness. And but yeah, he just we just kept replacing parts of him and all of that sort of stuff. Spence was, as I said, the more adventurous one. And I remember, so I was in my 20s when I got them. I was living in a share house in Carlton. So trams, roundabouts, that inner city sort of vibe. And I remember I was coming back from a night drinking, and it was about 11 o'clock at night, wandering home, walking down Pigden Street. And we were on the corner of a street with a roundabout in the middle. And I was walking down to Pigden Street, and I look up, and Spence is sitting in the middle of a roundabout at 11:30 at night, just like cleaning himself. And I just see him, and I'm just like, Spence, what are you doing? And he looks up, and he's just like, and runs towards me, past me, over the back gate into the house. And then I come around to the front door, open it up, and he's sitting in the hall, and he's just like, hey, what's up? And I'm just like, I saw you. I saw exactly what you're doing. He's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Uh, he was always a little bit of a naughty child. Once I woke up to a live pigeon in my room that they had brought in, which was horrific. And yeah, that was that made me agree quite a lot with the council laws. I was just like, no, I can see that. They were unfortunately a very destructive pair in terms of like the local wildlife. When we lived in Elstonwick, which is overrun with possums, I was getting about a possum a week, which was, they just, I imagined that they worked in a bit of a tag team situation. Their body count was pretty high when it came to possums. And it's interesting because now I'm living in the bush with a cat and a dog, and my cat Coochie, he's out during the day and comes in at nighttime. But he has never brought any wildlife home. My dog has caught more birds and mice than my cat Gucci. He just like, he's just not interested in catching things or chasing things. But Spence and Nips, they unfortunately had quite a high body count between them.
How would you say over the time from when you first picked up the two boys and took them home, how did your relationship change to your cats? What did they start to mean to you?
That's a really interesting question. I actually feel that I grew up quite a lot looking after Spence and Nips and having to look after them into their old age, and to palate them as they passed on was very intense. And I'm so grateful for that experience. Um, when I got the cats, it was very casual. It was just, "Oh, I get myself a couple of kittens, la 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 la." And all of my previous sort of pet ownership, I'd had one cat that I looked after myself as an adult, and all of my other pets had been family pets. So my only one experience was a cat that I'd effectively abandoned when I'd gone overseas and my mum had taken the care of. So with Spence and Nipster, with those boys, I got them at 5 months old, and I looked after them until they were 15 and 17 when they passed away from very old age. And I grew so much in that time, and I understood my connection to animals so much better, and I understood what they give us as well. And I'm so privileged to have looked after an animal, to have spent that time effectively being their caretaker and their attendant and their buddy through life. They chose, whatever fates work together, chose me to look after these animals, and I'm so grateful for that. So Spence and Nipster, I do look at them as, beings that I got to look after in this lifetime. And yeah, sorry, just getting a bit teary because I had to look after them in a stage of their life where they were quite dependent on me for care, for pain relief, to, help them pass on and everything. It was it's such a privileged role to play in someone's life when they let you in at that time of their life. When we're talking about humans, I had a friend that passed away from brain cancer, and he um, invited me a couple of times to come and visit him when he was in palliative care. It's a really private thing, I think, when we're going through something like that. That's my feelings about it. And so to nurse an animal through that stage, I was like, I'm so grateful that I got to do this for them. and to relieve their suffering at the end as well. So, yeah, I felt like I grew up a lot. I don't have children. We've not been successful in trying for children. That's possibly something that I'm reading a bit more into the relationship than some people would. But I feel that the role that animals play in our life has changed quite a lot in the last 20 years. We've seen council laws change. We've seen the medicine around animals change as well. So they're living a lot longer. It is actually our duty of care to do the right thing for them, to make sure they've got a healthy life. They are these little things that are completely dependent on us to not stuff up for them and to make sure that they've got a happy, healthy life. So I really appreciate Spence and Nips for giving me that, for helping me mature as an owner and as an attendant of animals to, look at them with a bit of a different lens now. So that they definitely helped me mature and become a better person for it, and a lot more loving person as well. I never thought that I could love things this deeply, and that's something that I've realized as well, like with my partner. My partner and I have been together for 20 years, and at first that love is really like, surface level, and it feels quite intense and quite passionate. But the love I have for him now, almost 20 years later, is so deep. It runs so deep. And with Spence and Nip, same sort of thing. That love just deepens every single year to the point where you're just like, wow, like I can't imagine my life without you. And so when they did pass, it was quite a big adjustment for me as well to not have a cat in my life. And that only lasted 6 months, and I was like, all right, time for another cat. Let's do this.
Well, they were lucky to find you, and you were lucky to find them. What I'd love to talk to you about with Spence and Nipster is when you were watching them grow up in their, I guess you'd call them their younger years, and then they went to their adolescent/teenage years, and then their middle age to their golden years, so to speak. What did you notice about their characters? Because it sounds like Spence was very bold and a bit outrageous, and Nipster was probably, until Spencer left, he was a little bit quiet and more reserved. How did
Yes.
their personalities change?
It's interesting because I didn't realize when they were old exactly how old they were. Like the vet said to me, I think at one point for Nipster when he was like 15, she said, "Oh yeah, he's like the equivalent of like a 97-year-old man." I'm like, whoa, that's
Whoa.
pretty intense. And yeah, so their entire life they were called the kittens, and they will always be the kittens. They were never cats. And they actually kept up their personalities until probably about 14 years old. And then they just sort of slowed down a little bit. And they'd always, as I said, they'd always been indoor, outdoor cats, outdoors during the day, indoors at night. Eventually started closing that window. Yeah, and then they were indoors at night. And then I remember when we moved homes when they were about 14 years old, they decided to be indoor cats. They didn't wander outdoors anymore. And that was a really big change for me. I was just like, oh, wow, that's really interesting. They'd go into the backyard and stuff like that. So, but they didn't want to roam. They weren't interested in seeing what else is out there. They just wanted to be comfy and warm. Yeah, so that was a really big change. And then obviously as they got elderly, and I could actually say no, they're elderly animals now, you do tend to notice those changes a little bit more because you're looking out for signs of health and signs of ailment and stuff like that. But yeah, it was Spencer's always quite bold. When they were about probably 12 or 13, we introduced a dog into their life, Freya. And I was really quite worried because, Spence and Nips had ruled the roost for over a decade, and we were about to introduce a very unpredictable animal into their life. And they took it all in their stride. They were just like, yep, another weird thing in the house. That's fine. I remember my friends would bring over their dogs on lead when they'd come for a visit, and, in the backyard. Spence and Nips would sit in one of my windows just looking at them. They didn't want to go near them, didn't want to touch them. They just sit and stare and monitor the situation. But that was just like a day here and there. So when I brought in a dog that just wasn't going away, there was a couple of days where they were just like, Psh, I don't want to know about this. And then after 2 days, they were like, okay, this person's not leaving. we have to deal with it. Spence and Freya became quite firm friends, which was really cute. They wouldn't cuddle up and do all of those amazing Instagrammable moments, but they were quite friendly with one another, quite curious about one another. But Nipster and Freya, they just took one look at each other and went, yeah, we're just going to orbit the same planet. We're never going to actually come into contact with each other. So they kept that up pretty much until Nipster passed away. They just did not care for each other.
It's so hard when you start to have to say goodbye to your lovely little fur ball. When did you start to notice, because it was obviously Spencer that left you first, when did you start to notice that it was time for him? He was maybe not the best and it was getting close to the end for him.
Unfortunately, with cats and dogs, by the time you start to notice a symptom, it's quite far gone for them because they're not telling you that, hey, I feel a bit off today or anything like that. So with Spence, it was a limp. He developed a limp in his front paw. We went and got it checked out and discovered that it was a tumor. And then as soon as they gave that diagnosis, all of a sudden his legs started swelling up. You noticed the lumps quite a lot. And it was really unfortunate because that was in the height of COVID. Unfortunately, Spence had to hang around a little bit longer than he should have. And I absolutely feel for him. And I remember, being in tears, saying to him, like, please just go if you need to. And unfortunately, he didn't. Death is not as convenient as that. And Danny and I both had COVID. It was when they stuffed up all of those tests and they lost half of them, or they were so backlogged they couldn't process them. So people were stuck. I was one of those people whose tests they'd lost, and I was stuck at home like 3 weeks instead of 10 days or something like that. And so when we said goodbye to Spence, Danny, who it was like day one, he was allowed out that morning. And I called the vet and said, we're bringing Spence up. And Danny took him up and had to hand him over. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to be in the room, which was really hard. But we'd organised with the service that was cremating him that Danny would bring Spence home. And so we could all say goodbye to him, and then they would come and pick him up from our home, which was really lovely. Pretty sure I gave those ladies COVID because I was just like crying and spitting. And in terms of airborne diseases, I was leaking a lot of fluids when I handed that boy over.
I shouldn't laugh.
No. I mean, you got to laugh, right? It was ridiculous in the end. It was just like, I can't believe this is going on right now, and how ridiculous the world was with COVID. It was just a completely new set of rules
It
for
was
us.
wild.
Yeah, absolutely. And, people were like, oh, you can leave home if you have to like take your animal to the vet and it's an emergency. And I'm just like, there was so much going on at that time. And when you're looking after them in the last days, and the vet said to us, I think you're better off making that choice yourself rather than waiting until, it's possibly too far gone, which is unfortunately what we did. They said, oh, it's probably going to be in the next few weeks. And we said, okay, then, we'll just take it sort of day by day at this stage. And within a week he was, ready to go, but we'd gotten COVID and it was awful. It was very hard because he was so pumped up on meds and things like that, on all this pain relief, and this massive cocktail of pain relief. He was barely eating. He wasn't moving himself around much. And you're looking for any sign of life at that stage, but you have to remember, like, a sign of life is not life. It's this one thing. And, one thing in 3 days is not sustainable. Danny and I, it's our family. We have to agree on when we're going to say goodbye to him. And then COVID and everything took that out of our hands anyway. That one was really hard. And I feel like Spence sort of took a bullet for us because this is the first time Danny and I as a family had to make a decision about a member of our family. So we had to be in agreement on that. And then when it was Nipster's time, Nipster had bladder problems throughout his entire life, and he would constantly get cystitis where he was unable to urinate until he'd gotten some drugs, which would soften everything up for him, and then he could pee. That was a recurring thing with him. But then he got cystitis again, and he just wasn't picking up. The meds were actually making him feel quite a lot worse. There was a couple of times where we had to go in and give him fluids, And there was one day where they said, listen, his body temperature is so cold that if we can't raise it within the next day, we're going to, he's not going to make it. And I took him home and I wrapped him up in an electric blanket, and he became better. But I spoke to the vet that day as well, and I said, look, it's Wednesday now. Let's organise Friday that we'll go and say, look, we'll, help him pass on. And so those last couple of days was really difficult. He just wanted to sit on the couch. He wasn't eating. He needed to go to the toilet. Like, stuff was just going straight through him. But the meds were just wreaking havoc with him. So I said to them, if I just take him off all meds for the last couple of days of his life, is he going to be in masses of pain? And they said, no, like at this stage, he's going to be, it's bearable for him to do that. The meds are making him feel worse, if anything else. So we took him off his meds, and the last couple of days I stayed on the couch with him. I just took time off work and slept on the couch every night with him. He was on his electric blanket. He was just like, yep, this is all I need to do, Leisl. And I'd take him over to the litter box and give him some chicken broth every now and then. And I remember, so the cat slept in the lounge room and my dog slept on the floor in our bedroom. It was only because the cats would wake up at 3 a.m. going, time for breakfast. So we'd always put them in a room with a closable door. I didn't get to sleep in the bed with them or anything like that. And so the last night of Nipster's life, I woke up on Friday morning and he was asleep in my arms. And it was just really sweet because he hadn't really liked to have been handled in the last week or so. He didn't like being picked up. He was clearly just not in a very comfortable state. But that last morning, he'd come up and crawled into my arms just for one last cuddle, which was, it was a beautiful thing to wake up to. It was really lovely. So I'm very grateful for that moment.
Oh, that's so special. He
Mm.
chose you. He
Yeah,
wanted that cuddle with you.
absolutely. It was very interesting because Nipster, I tended to see a lot of anthropomorphizing here, but he knew what was going on and he knew what was coming. It was very strange. Like, this cat who had not taken himself outdoors for 2 years, all of a sudden got up and walked outdoors in the backyard and went and sat by Freya's drinking trough and just sort of like leaned into it. And I was filling it up at the time and the water was spraying on his face. And he was just sitting there looking at me going, "It's great." And it was just a real sort of like sitting on the dock of the bay type moment. I could just imagine the music and I was just like, he's saying goodbye. He's just experiencing sunshine and fresh air, and he knows that it's going soon. So he's just, grabbing his moments while he can. So that's what I felt like with that. And then when I woke up with him in my arms, I was just like, oh, buddy, yes, absolutely. And yeah, we had lots and lots of cuddles that morning.
What do you think you learned from Nipster and Spence after they left you, when you had some time to process and some time to grieve?
It was interesting because the grief was also tempered with, it was their time. Like, they didn't have an accident. They weren't taken from me too soon. They died of old age. And so I think that really tempered that grief for me, which was, a gift, because it was just like, I saw how sick they were. And any sadness I felt was my sadness. It was just like, I just want them here. And, my love has nowhere to go, basically. It's, there's no animal to receive my love right now, except for Freya, who, um, I showered her with treats during the whole period and took her to the vets, and they're like, yeah, she's 12 kilos overweight. I'm like, yeah, that seems about right. And so
Understand why, though.
absolutely, we stress eat. That is what we do in my house. So following Spence and Nips not being there, it was really strange not having a cat in the house. I didn't feel like I needed a cat in the house. They were still so present. And I remember I was having some very vivid dreams when they died. So once Nipster had died, there was no more Nips and Spence. Nips was my connection to Spence as well. So now that Nips had gone, they were both gone in an even heavier way. I remember I had this dream and it was very vivid. Within the dream, I saw Spence and Nips at the end of it, and they were just little silhouettes on this peak of a hill I was walking up. and Spence mules. And somewhere in my memory, it brought that sound back for me. And I'm just like, I've not heard that sound in like 2 years. That's Spence's mule right now. And in seeing them, they didn't speak to me, but I just got this sense of like it's cool, Leisl, like we're here, we're together now, and we'll be waiting for you. So we'll see you soon. So don't stress. It was just a very lovely, reassuring dream. And whether it was my brain telling me that or anything like that, um, I didn't need it to help me get through my grief, but it was just really special. And I woke up smiling. And you know, when your heart swells and it's very warm, when you've got that physical sensation of love, and I woke up feeling that, and I just clutched my chest, and I'm just like, oh, I'm so grateful for that. Whenever I think of Spence and Nips now, whenever they pop into my head or it's a memory, I just tell myself that that's them visiting me. You know, it might be that my brain is just having a memory or something like that, but who's to say that it's not also their spirit coming by, just slapping my brain, going, hey, give her a memory right now, we're here. So, you know, I always think about that. I've got pictures of them all over the place. I found this artwork that just it was them. It was just the two of them. But it was these two cats with their backs to the artist. And it was exactly their posture. And there were these two tabby cats sitting together. It's a very simple line drawing. And I saw it, I just gasped. I'm like, holy shit. Sorry to swear. I'm just like, oh my gosh, like this painting was 60 years ago, but that is my Spence and Nips. I recognize their posture in that picture. So I've got this little shelf in my bedroom, which has got their ashes, a couple of figurines, a couple of bronze little statuettes, and this framed picture, this framed artwork, because that is whenever I walk by it, that's my Spence and Nips. I say hi to my boys. So yeah, it's been an interesting grief journey. And I think as well, like being this age, being 45, where we're seeing people in our life pass away, that, you know, we're thinking about our parents' mortality, things like that, and our own mortality. I know people my age that are passing away as well.
Yeah. Me
Um,
too.
yeah, we can approach grief with a little less indulgence. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but when we're younger and we feel grief, it's so consuming, and it's always in relation to how I'm feeling. I'm feeling this and I'm feeling that. But, you know, my grief is tempered right now with Spence and Nips. We're ready to go, and that's okay. But because I got to look after them their entire life, like who gets to say that? So yeah, I feel very privileged.
It's such an honor. It's such an honor to take care of an animal and them take care of you, because I think that in a lot of ways, even if you don't realize it in the routine of the day to day of looking after your animal, they're looking after you. They're giving you their unconditional love, which is in so many ways our day to days interactions or transactions are conditional. They come with condition, and they come with, you know, you've got to do this for that. So it's a really beautiful relationship, even if the scientific amongst the listeners might say that it's anthropomorphizing. I don't care.
I don't care either. I anthropomorphize everything. I found this lizard that had been attacked by a bird, and I came up with a backstory for it immediately. And I was like, turned to my partner with tears in my eyes. He's like, oh, Leisl. I said, I know, I've got to stop doing this to every animal I meet. I found a bird statue that my previous homeowner, the people who bought this house off. So I walked past the bush, and I saw this little bird head poking out of the leaf litter. And I'm like, oh, a bird has made a nest, a bird has made a nest. And I went and got the dog fence, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, because like the dog will get it, the cat will get it. And I ran in and ran outside and erecting this force field around this tiny bird. And I'm looking at this bird, and I'm like, why is that bird not moving? And I realized because it is made out of resin. And I go and pick it up, and it's this beautiful resin sparrow statue. Like it's bird size as well. It's life size. It fits in my hand, and I'm just looking at the statue, tears streaming down my face, because I'd been ready to adopt this, you know, this poor plastic bird and its family, because I thought it was making a nest, and it wasn't. It was just some goddamn figurine the previous owner had left behind. Anyway, so that bird now, it's got a place on my bench, and it can just sit there forever and continue to bring joy. But yeah, I anthropomorphize every single animal I meet, because I think they do. They have their own personalities. They've got their own little souls. And yes, it might be me reading into a situation, but isn't that everything, right? It's our interactions with things, the importance we attach to them. That's what, that's what our lives are. So
I feel like now I know Spence and Nipster just a little bit better than what I did when we first started talking. And I can just imagine them being curled up, their orange little bottoms. And I've seen photos of them, so I know that they're really cute, fluffy boys. But I wonder for you, the journey of meeting them and bringing them into your life and how it changed you. What would you say, thinking back on them, is the greatest lesson you've taken away from them being in your life for you?
yeah, definitely keep your windows shut at night unless you want to wake up to a screaming bird. And I never thought I'd hear what a bird sounded like when it screamed, but I have now. And if anything, I think those boys taught me how to parent, how to care for something, how to, love something that didn't owe you anything. It sometimes it felt like a very asynchronous relationship. Um, but when you start to look for those little things, when you look for their language, you just feel so loved. You feel really deeply loved. And, um, I really like the science that is behind, uh, the wellness that animals can bring to us, how they can, diminish our feelings of loneliness, even though we might have a one-sided conversation with them, conversing with them as if they're an actual person does things for our brain that, being alone does not. So they are such a rich thing to have in our lives. And if we're in a society that has them as pets, that looks after them, we actually have to do that, right? So yeah, they've taught me a lot about caring, which is, I think I'm a better person for having owned two beautiful boys who have let me love them. It's, such a positive relationship, and I have become a more caring and loving person because of.
And you've got Freya, and like I'd imagine that Freya's obviously a very big dog. Like I've seen pictures of Freya, and is she a Tibetan Mastiff?
She is. She's lost some weight, so she's under 50 kilos now. But yeah, she's a 50-kilo black and tan Tibetan Mastiff. Beautiful face, very fluffy, double coated. Um, can come across quite assertive and grumpy to complete strangers. But if you're in her inner circle of two people, which luckily I am, she absolutely adores you.
And you've also got your pussycat as well, that you said that you adopted. It was about 6 months after you lost Nipster. How is life having these obviously two very different animals? You've got a dog and a cat, and you've now got a potentially different relationship with them. How is it for you now having these two wonderful animals, again, part of your life, part of your journey as a human being on the planet, caring for some other beings on the planet? Like, what's it like having them in your life?
Well, you know how there are triggers and the opposite of that is glimmers. Those little moments that, bring you absolute joy, or a moment where you're just like, oh, life is wonderful, as opposed to, oh, life terrible. Thanks for taking me back to that moment. I have a million glimmers every single day because of these two animals. Coochie and Freya, they actually don't get along quite a lot. Again, it's just this acceptance of, yep, you're here, I'm here, never our paths shall cross. But they have their own little worlds going on. So Coochie is a beautiful grey and white sort of tuxedo cat, male, and he comes on all of our adventures. I'll make this about Coochie now. We moved to the country. We live on, the end of the road, one neighbour, and behind us is this gorgeous forest. So whenever we go on a trawl through the forest with Freya on lead, Coochie likes to follow us, and he's off lead, and he just follows us deep into the forest, and we walk all the way back. And I have never seen that behavior in a cat before. And I wonder if it's because I was living in the suburbs. Obviously, our walks, were very different. There was dogs, there was cars, there was buses. And honestly, it was a very boring walk walking around the suburbs compared to walking through a forest. But that was a new cat behavior I'd never seen. And I'm just like, wow, that's really cool that he can be off lead, off road, comes into the forest. And so Freya's like sniffing around the bunny holes. He's climbing a tree. And whenever I call him, because he's like, lingering, he'll run up after us, and he hops like a bunny when he runs. It's really, really cute. Um, So having Coochie and Freya now, especially with a relationship where they don't really care for each other, is very varied. It can be, quite hilarious to watch. Sometimes it does my head in, especially if Freya decides to guard a pocket of space that no one knows why she's attached importance to it. I work from home, so having these two around me constantly is really wonderful. And it's interesting because now that I am working from home, I am just like, no, I'm sorry, I can't come in to the city and do an 8-hour day because I can't leave my animals alone for that long. Now, especially that I'm regional, add 4 hours travel on top of that as well. It's just a bit more intense. So my life revolves around my animals, and that's totally okay.
I love that. Is there any last thoughts you'd like to share about your journey of looking after such beautiful animals in your life?
I think just for me, animals are so necessary in life. And I remember when Nipster had passed and it had been 6 months without an animal, and what led me to adopting Coochie was my friend had bought a house, and she'd gotten the keys, and she got there and there was 14 cats in the backyard. So the previous owners had moved on, and they were clearly all of these strays that they were just feeding. And she, being a cat owner, a cat lover as well, was just like, I have to rehome all of these animals because she was like, if I caught them, it was obvious that they were going to be put down because there were so many of them as well. If she'd took them in and given them to a rescue. She caught all of these animals, all of these cats, and went through the process of rehoming them and had to put off moving into this house until she could sort all of those animals. Coochie was one of the first cats she'd caught, and I remember seeing this picture, this beautiful grey and white cat, going, "Oh, gorgeous." Well, and nowhere in my brain did I say, "Hey, Leisl, you should adopt that little kitten." Um, and so I was following along the story on Instagram. She'd adopted most of the cats out, and this grey and white cat was still around, and she was talking about how smoochy they were and how lovely they were. And she was referring to the cat as a she as well. And I'd gone to uh, an alpaca craft day, which was out at Heathcote, this alpaca farm, and they invited you to come along and sit there with your craft, your knit, your crochet, whatever. I went there and drew, just sitting around alpacas for 2 hours. It was so lovely. It was just such an amazing thing. And I'm watching these alpacas, and I'm just like, animals are such a source of joy for me. Like, they are so beautiful. I love them so much. Why am I denying myself this joy? And whenever I met a cat, I would get so teary. I'd be petting the cat, and I'd just be like, I really just want to pick you up and cuddle you because I want that little Nipster cuddle that I'd woken up with on his last day. And I don't get to do that. Freya's big, beautiful, fluffy. She's not a cuddler though. She's a leaner. She comes up and just leans on you. You put your arms around her and she's like, oh, too much, and walks off. So having this little liquidy velvet ball of catness in my arms, I just really wanted that. And so I'm looking at these alpacas, which are nothing like cats, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, why am I denying myself happiness? Because animals just bring me so much happiness. I'm going to adopt that goddamn cat. And told my partner that night. I said, oh, by the way, we're going to do this. And he's just like, yep, absolutely. Whenever you're ready. He knows how important cats are to me and how important Spence and Nips are and everything as well. Texted my mate and I'm just like, hey, let's do this. And went and picked him up the next week because I had to go and get a whole bunch of stuff because after Nipster had died, I'd gotten rid of a lot of stuff. And I remember pulling up to her house and I was really nervous. It was like being on a date. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so nervous right now because everything would change. Nothing would be like how I knew it again. We were suddenly bringing in this new cat, this new personality into our family unit. What was that going to be like? And after having had Spence and Nips for so long, I was very scared of what something different would be, but also super excited at the same time. And because I know that once I adopt an animal, that's it. I'm with them till the end. Doesn't matter, you know, if she and Freya wouldn't get along or anything like that. Oh, and then I actually transferred the ownership, and I found out that Coochie was a male, just a sexed. And so I'd gone in thinking I was adopting a girl and came home with a boy. And I'm just like, that's all right. I know boy cats. I like boy cats. Boy cats are hilarious. So yeah, it was very interesting. But that was the whole reason that I decided to get another cat because I was like, why? They are such a source of my joy. I love them so much. They bring so much to my life. Why am I not doing that? Like it was just, there was nothing in my circumstances that said I couldn't have another animal. So I was just, let's do this.
I think that's so lovely. I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for sharing the story of Spencer and Nipster with me today. Because hearing your story and how much you love them, and also Coochie and Freya, it just makes me feel connected to the love that I feel for my animals. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me a moment to talk about them. They're only gone when we start forgetting them, right? So, this is giving me a lovely trip down memory lane. And yeah, always happy to talk about my favorite boys.